Today we're sewing a beautiful spring knit dress, the Barbara dress by Annie Itzik Couture. This dress does offer a color blocking option. I chose to use the same fabric throughout. This dress features a V-neck with a facing and a gathered front and back waistband. We'll sew this dress together from start to finish through all of the detailed steps of sewing that V-neck facing and attaching that gathered waistband. All of the main seam allowances for this project are 1/4 of an inch, and you are wanting to use a stretch stitch. The pattern comes together quite nicely, and I hope you join me in this sew along. Let's get started. Apply your interfacing to the wrong sides of your front and back facing pieces. Then we'll place these pieces right sides together along the shoulder seams and pin in place. And then sew your shoulder seams with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once the shoulder seams are sewn, we can open out those facing pieces. And then we want to finish the raw edges of the facing all around the entire piece. Place your front and back bodice pieces right sides together, matching your shoulders, and pin in place. Sew your shoulder seams with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Here are my front and back bodice pieces opened out away from each other at the shoulder seams. We're going to place our facing and the bodice neckline right sides together and pin in place along the neckline, making sure to match up those shoulder seams. Then, using my sewing machine and a regular straight stitch, I'm going to sew around the neckline with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that the facing is sewn to the neckline, we're going to understitch. We're going to turn that facing over its seam allowance and then sew the facing to its seam allowance underneath with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around the neckline. I'm going to use a pair of sharp scissors to clip into the seam allowance of the V area, clipping to my stitching line but not beyond. As we're understitching around the V, as I'm approaching the V, I'm going to stop about 1/2 of an inch away from the point of a V and backstitch to secure, and then start the understitching again on the other side of the V, again about 1/2 of an inch away from the point. So here's the V where I understitched, stopping my stitching 1 inch away from the V on both sides. I did the same starting and stopping of stitching around the corner of the neckline as well. Now I'll turn my facing to the inside of the garment, and I'll poke out the corners of the neckline. And then we can give that neckline a nice press. Then turn the bodice inside out, and I'm just going to use a needle and thread here to tack my shoulder seam of the facing and the bodice together along the edges. Doing that for both shoulder seams. Take your front shirring band to the sewing machine, and we're going to baste the side edges from top to bottom using the longest stitch on your machine, leaving thread tails on both ends so that you have threads to pull for gathering. I'm going to be basting with just shy of a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then pull your basting stitches to gather both short ends. Then place the wrong side of your shirred piece on the right side of your front band piece. The gathered short end should fit perfectly with the front band short edge, and pin in place. Doing the same on both sides. Now I'll take these 2 short pieces back to the sewing machine and baste those short edges once again from top to bottom. And repeat the exact same steps to create your back waistband as well. Here is the bottom edge of my front bodice piece. Place the notched edge of your front waistband right sides together with the bottom of your front bodice. Pin in place matching your notches. Then sew this seam from one side to the other with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that the front band is attached to the front bodice, we can attach the front skirt. Place the top of your front skirt piece right sides together with the bottom of your front band. And pin in place. And then sew the skirt to the band with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now the front dress is complete and we can repeat all of the same steps to complete the back dress. Starting by attaching the band to the bodice, and then attaching the top of the back skirt to the bottom of the back band. Then place your front and back dress pieces right sides together along one side seam and pin in place. Pin in place from the underarm seam to the bottom hem, making sure to align the top and bottom seams of the band. And then sew the side seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and repeat for the other side seam. For the armholes, we're going to be turning the seam allowance to the wrong side by 1/2 inch and pinning in place all the way around. Then we can sew the hem in place using a twin needle, your cover stitch machine, or just a regular wide zigzag stitch. And to hem the very bottom of the dress, we're going to turn the raw edge to the wrong side by 1 inch and pin all the way around. Once the hem is ready, you can secure it in place using the same method as you did for sewing the armholes. Give everything a nice final press and your dress is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. I'll see you in the next video.